Welcome, I'm Michael Price, your host.
And I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Imagine waking up one morning, checking your email, and realizing that the golden ticket to your business's survival has just been revoked. Not just for you, but for over 100 of your peers at the exact same time. It sounds like a corporate horror story, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but for federal contractors, this is the reality on the ground right now. We are looking at a massive shakeup.
We're talking about the Small Business Administration, the SBA, making a move that has sent shockwaves through the government contracting world. They are proposing to terminate 154 companies from the 8A Business Development Program. Now, for the uninitiated, getting kicked out of this program isn't just a slap on the wrist. It's an existential threat, isn't it?
Absolutely. To understand the gravity of this, you have to understand what the 8A program actually is. In the world of federal contracting, the 8A certification is widely considered the crown jewel. It allows small, disadvantaged businesses to compete for set-aside contracts that the big guys, the Lockheeds and the Boeings, can't touch. It even allows for sole source awards, meaning the government can just hand you a contract without you having to bid against anyone. It is quite literally a business maker.
So taking that away is like taking oxygen out of the room. But let's look at the number here, 154 companies. That feels unprecedented. Usually you hear about one or two bad apples getting tossed out for fraud or mismanagement, but a bulk termination of over 150 firms. What is going on here? Is this a glitch or is this a strategy?
It is definitely not a glitch. This is a calculated, strategic enforcement action. It's what I like to call a compliance correction. You see, the 8A program is designed to be a 9-year journey. It has a start date and an end date. It's a developmental program meant to take a company that is struggling due to social or economic disadvantage and teach them how to fish. But over the years, the program has, well, let's say it's accumulated some barnacles.
Barnacles? You mean companies that are just coasting?
Coasting, or worse, companies that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Or companies that got in, but then failed to follow the rules of the road. When you see a number like 154, it suggests the SBA is doing a sweeping audit of eligibility. They aren't just looking at, did you do a good job on the contract? They are looking at, are you actually who you say you are? And are you following the strict reporting requirements?
That's an interesting distinction because I think the public perception is that if the government fires a contractor, it's because they built a bridge that fell down or wrote code that crashed. But you're saying this is more administrative, it's about the DNA of the company?
Precisely. It's rarely about performance on the job site in these cases. It's about the back end. For example, one of the biggest issues the SBA tracks is economic disadvantage. To be an 8A, the owner has to have a personal net worth below a certain threshold. If your business takes off and you become a multimillionaire, technically you graduate. You're no longer economically disadvantaged. But some folks try to stay in the program to keep those easy contracts flowing.
Ah, the classic victim of your own success problem. But surely that doesn't account for 154 companies all at once. That feels like a systemic purge.
You're right to be skeptical. A sweep this size usually points to a specific trigger. It could be related to the recent court rulings that have challenged how the SBA defines social disadvantage. There's been a lot of legal pressure on the SBA to prove that their criteria are constitutional and not just based on broad assumptions. So the SBA has to tighten the screws. They have to prove that every single company in that portfolio has crossed every T and dotted every I regarding their eligibility narrative.
So, in a way, the SBA is protecting the program by culling the herd?
That is the charitable way to view it, yes. Think of it like a garden. If you let the weeds grow, and by weeds I mean ineligible companies or shell companies acting as fronts for larger corporations, they choke out the nutrients for the actual small businesses that need help. If the roster is clogged with 154 companies that aren't playing by the rules, that's 154 slots of opportunity being wasted.
I like the garden analogy, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. The bureaucracy of federal contracting is nightmare fuel. It is notoriously difficult. Is it possible that some of these 154 companies are just bad at paperwork? Are we seeing a situation where legitimate small businesses are getting crushed by the administrative burden and the SBA is just saying, too bad, you're out?
That is the tragedy inherent in the system, and it is a very real possibility. The 8A program requires annual reviews that are incredibly invasive. You have to submit tax returns, balance sheets, lists of all contracts. If you miss a deadline or if you fill out a form incorrectly, you get flagged. And when the SBA decides to do a sweep, they often use a broad brush. So yes, there is likely collateral damage here. There are probably decent business owners in that list of 154 who are just overwhelmed by the red tape.
And that raises a philosophical question about these government programs. We create them to help the little guy, but the barrier to entry and the barrier to staying in is so high that you almost need a team of high-priced lawyers just to remain compliant. Doesn't that defeat the purpose?
It's the central paradox of government aid. To prevent fraud, you create complexity. But complexity hurts the people who can't afford experts to navigate it. However, we have to look at the other side of the coin. The 8A program has been plagued for years by accusations of pass-through fraud.
Pass-through fraud. That's where a big company uses a small 8A company as a puppet, right?
Exactly. It's a Trojan horse scenario. A massive defense contractor finds a small 8A firm, helps them win a contract, but then the big company does 99% of the work and takes 99% of the profit. The 8A firm is just a shell, a pass-through vehicle. This undermines the entire integrity of the federal procurement system. If a significant chunk of these 154 terminated companies were involved in that kind of arrangement, then this purge isn't just bureaucratic housekeeping, it's a necessary act of justice.
So, this is a warning shot, a very loud one.
Oh, it's more than a warning shot. It's a controlled demolition. The SBA is signaling that the era of set it and forget it is over. They are using data analytics now. They can see if a company hasn't performed a contract in 2 years. They can see if a company's revenue doesn't match their staffing levels.
And that's a great point, technology changing the game. In the past, maybe you could hide in the filing cabinets. But now, the data trails are obvious.
Right. If you claim to be a construction company winning millions in contracts, but you have 0 employees on payroll and no equipment, the algorithm is going to flag you. And I suspect that's what happened here. The SBA likely ran a query across their database for specific non-compliance markers. Maybe missing annual reviews, maybe income discrepancies. And these 154 lit up the dashboard.
Let's talk about the fallout. If I'm one of these 154 companies, what happens? Do I just pack up my desk? What happens to my current contracts?
That is the messy part. Termination from the program doesn't always mean immediate cancellation of existing contracts, but it means you can't get new ones under the 8A banner. It cuts off your pipeline. For a business model built entirely on that status, it's a death sentence. But the ripple effect goes wider. Think about the agencies relying on these contractors.
The government agencies themselves?
Yes. If the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy was using one of these firms to fix a generator or write software, suddenly that vendor is persona non grata. The agency might have to recompete the contract. That means delays. That means higher costs. So while the SBA is cleaning house, they are also creating a massive headache for procurement officers across the federal government.
It's a disruption to the ecosystem, but maybe a necessary pain.
Short-term pain for long-term gain, theoretically. If you don't have integrity in the system, the taxpayers are getting ripped off, but there is a human cost. Behind every one of those 154 companies is an owner, employees, families. If they were cheating, fine. But if they were just struggling to keep up with the rules, that's heartbreaking.
It brings us back to the idea of intent. The SBA is essentially saying we don't have the resources to babysit. You are either compliant or you are gone. It feels like a shift toward a more ruthless, efficient style of governance.
It is, and it mirrors what we see in the private sector. Efficiency often comes at the cost of nuance. But there is another angle here, the graduation problem. I mentioned earlier that 8A is a 9-year program. Many companies get to year 7 or 8 and realize they haven't built a commercial business. They are 100% dependent on the government.
They're addicted to the subsidy.
Exactly. And when the SBA threatens termination, it exposes that dependency. These companies aren't ready to survive in the wild. If this purge includes companies that were just lingering, trying to milk the last few years without actually developing, then the SBA is essentially pulling the plug on life support.
Which sounds harsh, but if the goal is business development and you haven't developed, well, the proof is in the pudding.
Right. The program isn't a welfare check, it's an incubator. If the chick doesn't hatch, you can't keep sitting on the egg forever.
I love that image, even if it is a bit brutal. So, looking forward, We have this list of 154. Is this the new normal? Should every 8A contractor out there be looking over their shoulder right now?
100%. If I were advising an 8A firm today, I would say, audit yourself before they audit you. Check your files. Make sure your net worth statement is accurate. Make sure your bona fide place of business is actually a place of business and not a P.O. box. The SBA has clearly signaled that they are moving from a passive monitoring role to an active enforcement role. The Eye of Sauron has turned toward the portfolio.
The Eye of Sauron, that's a terrifying thought for a small business owner. But perhaps it leads to a stronger, more resilient market in the end.
That is the hope. A cleaner market means the companies that survive are the ones that are actually good at what they do, not just good at gaming the system. It raises the bar. And frankly, for the taxpayer, that is a win. We want our government contracts going to high-performing, legitimate small businesses that drive the economy, not paper tigers.
It's a fascinating moment. It's a collision of law, economics, and ethics. We have the rules, we have the money, and we have the question of what is fair.
And the answer to what is fair changes depending on whether you are the regulator or the regulated. But one thing is certain, 154 companies are finding out the hard way that the government gives and the government takes away.
The government gives and the government takes away. That's a sobering thought to wrap up on. It seems the free ride, if there ever was one, is officially over.
It is. The era of scrutiny is here.
Well, for our listeners involved in contracting, take heed. And for everyone else, it's a reminder of how fragile these systems really are. We'll be watching to see if this is a one-time purge or the first wave of a tsunami. Thanks for breaking this down with me.
Always a pleasure. Let's hope the garden grows better after the weeding.
Indeed. Until next time.
Bye for now.